at losing your freedom of speech and being censored on the internet. It's all being driven by ESG ideology. Who's in control? What can you do about it?
Much persecuted for our beliefs. In February last year, Pawlowski delivered a speech to truckers who were protesting federal vaccine mandates by blocking the U.S.-Canada border. He urged them to go about their plan peacefully and not to, quote, break the line. Just days after the event, he was arrested. The court found him guilty of mischief and other charges.
I believe the charges of mischief and especially eco-terrorism are really unjust.
There's no mischief. This man he's fed the homeless. He stood by the truckers. He fed them. He preached the gospel of Christ. He stood against some things that are very ungodly in Canada. That's what he did wrong on their side.
For what they call mischief, which is either they don't like what they say, but they also don't want anybody else to hear it. And finally, they don't like what they say, they don't want anybody else to hear it, and they want to teach them a lesson so nobody else will say anything.
Pastor Pawlowski is no stranger to the Canadian law enforcement. He was arrested 5 times after continuing his church service during the nationwide COVID-19 lockdown. His name first became well known back in 2021, following a confrontation with police and other health officials. They visited his church to make sure it was obeying pandemic guidelines, which included limiting the number of people and social distancing. Pawlowski said that they entered his church without a warrant, and therefore, he kicked them out.
What's happening to Pastor Pawlowski, if we don't stand and fight this, it's going to happen right here in America.
Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
And Secretary, there are a lot of things that happen that warn Hong Kong people that something is wrong, but 2019 was the moment that people finally woke up and say, this is enough. We can't do this anymore, and you should fulfill the promise during the handover. There is a promise that Hong Kong people should have the rights to vote for their leader, to have the rights to vote for the chief executive and elect the chief executive. That never happened, and that was like the last fight for freedom in Hong Kong, I guess.
It's a difficult thing to think about. You know, I got to travel to Hong Kong in 2019 in that year and got to meet with some of the amazing people who were actively working to try to foster freedom, who were putting everything on the line.
Well, the movement was joined by people from all walks of life. There are lawyers, there are journalists, students, you name it, any kind of like businessmen, any leaders in different industry. They all come together because they understand if Hong Kong don't get the freedom, the judicial independence and the rule of law, it's not going to be Hong Kong anymore. There's nothing about Hong Kong that's more special than the international financial center, like the status of it, and also, you know, the freedom we get. And so that's why everyone is stepping out and say this is enough.
But there were still a lot of people, and this is what I find kind of interesting, right? In every one of these situations, I've watched this. You know, my parents, they came from communist Poland. They had to get out in the 70s. That's how I ended up in Canada. Then later here, changed my life, changed their lives. But in any one of these situations, there's people that have that exactly the sense that you have, and you know, millions of Hong Kongers did. But then there's also a lot of people that have a different view too, right? And you know, and even like I remember there was this, you know, there were different stores, some stores that were pro-protester and coffee shops, and then there were other ones which were anti. It became this kind of is very interesting, right? So what do you think of the people who were keep the status quo? This isn't so bad. It's going to be okay. Maybe we even want the mainland approach. I don't know. Because it was a substantive number, right?
It is, yeah. Well, first, I don't blame them, but they're also the people who are, it's an extension of the CCP in repressing people who fight for freedom and democracy for them too. A lot of times they attack pro-democracy protesters. A trend that we see is a lot of them are more on the older generations. They, you know, experienced under British colonization, and they feel like having that background, they feel more connected to China. I can understand that, but a lot of times these people are also, they don't want to change. They think Hong Kong is good. They have the freedom to go, you know, go around, and it's not as strict as mainland China. They still have the freedom to do whatever they want. But the kind of liberties that we want is the right to speak up for speak up the truth and not having to experience like persecutions because we speak up and say the truth.
And because it is He who bestowed them with life. During this final phase of the cosmos's formation, stasis, degeneration, and destruction cycle, the Creator spent 200 million years making the three realms, as well as planning and putting in place the many ways and opportunities by which lives could be saved, all the while laying a foundation for humanity's culture, thought, and conduct. He furthermore used his own divine body to reduce and resolve the sinful karma of the multitude of lives. He has given everything of his in order to save all life. Over the course of those 200 million years, the Creator reincarnated with multiple bodies at the same time, countless in number, and laid the foundation for humanity's culture in this world, while overseeing and guarding humankind's morals. This was done so that people might, one day, when during the end times the age of salvation would come, meet the standard set for them by divine beings. People's souls have reincarnated repeatedly over the long and drawn-out ages of history, and spend tens of millions of years in waiting. Over time, the true bodies of the souls of most of the world's people, and this holds true for all ethnicities and races, established some form of familial tie with the Creator. This led the Creator to love the world's people, his people, only more. With the arrival of the end times, it became forbidden for lives without such a tie to become human. This was done so as to ensure that the task of salvation could be better fulfilled. By that time, the true bodies of the people on this earth were all those of his people, and so too were the divine beings that people believe in, who incarnated as human beings and served to impart spiritual teachings. Their mission was to, while assuming human form, lay the cultural foundation intended by the divine for man's salvation, in the end, by the Creator. The virtuous and authentic religions they left to this world have carried on in order to uphold morality as people await their eventual salvation by the Creator. The Creator has the right to love his people, and his love is even greater for those he deems befitting of love. He is entitled to do so, and no one or no entity has the right to intervene. That is his supreme grace toward these lives. The Creator is the Lord of all divine beings in the cosmos. He is the maker of the Lord of Lords, of the King of Kings, and he is the sovereign of all lives, including the three realms' human lives, spiritual beings, and material things, all of which he made. His love is the highest and most sacred blessing for all lives. There is no greater honor for any person in this world than to be loved by him. Teacher Li Hongzhi, April 17th, 2023.
Campaign, including, quote, all documents or communications between or among any employees of Anheuser-Busch regarding the partnership, copies of all scripts, including any and all drafts reviewed by Anheuser-Busch, copies of any guidance or requests provided by Anheuser-Busch or its agents directing, encouraging, or soliciting content from Dylan Mulvaney related to Bud Light, all documents or communications between Dylan Mulvaney and his agents regarding the Bud Light deal, copies of any post-marketing audits that were conducted to measure the effectiveness of the campaign, copies of all materials showing the age demographics of Mulvaney's audience, and so on and so forth. Basically, the senators want to see all of the internal communications regarding why Mulvaney was chosen, what the audience profile is, and whether or not there was a concerted effort to target minors. Now, as a response to this letter, the CEO of Anheuser-Busch sent a generic response letter. You can see it up on screen for yourself. basically saying that the company does not target minors, that the company promotes responsible drinking very seriously, but notably, he did not hand over any of the internal company documents. This response then led Senator Ted Cruz to write a new letter, this one just last week. And in this letter, he essentially gave Anheuser-Busch an ultimatum, because in this particular situation, Congress cannot force them to hand over any documents. And so instead, here's what Senator Ted Cruz wrote, quote, "Nearly 3 months have passed since I requested documents from Mr. Woodward, who's the CEO of Anheuser-Busch, in my capacity as ranking member of the Commerce Committee, and Anheuser-Busch has yet to provide the committee with a single document. Anheuser-Busch's failure to cooperate and blatant disregard for U.S. congressional oversight is unacceptable. Given your broader responsibility for the Anheuser-Busch InBev portfolio of more than 500 brands, I trust you share my sincere concern with the possibility that Anheuser-Busch is marketing alcohol to children and will direct Anheuser-Busch to cooperate immediately with the Commerce Committee's investigation. The level of cooperation the committee receives will bear significantly on my assessment of whether this is part of a broader problem across the Anheuser-Busch InBev product line and whether changes to federal law are necessary to prohibit Anheuser-Busch InBev from marketing beer to children." And then he concluded the letter by giving them a hard deadline. Quote, "These dilatory tactics by your subsidiary must end. Otherwise, Anheuser-Busch InBev will leave Congress no choice but to infer this obstructionism is intended to shield inculpatory information from the committee's investigation. Accordingly, I request you instruct Anheuser-Busch to immediately comply with this investigation and document a request no later than August 29, 2023, which, for your reference, is exactly 7 days from today. However, regardless of how this Senate investigation plays itself out, Bud Light's prospects are not looking good. Their sales numbers continue to crater, and just last week, you had an analyst with RBC Capital forecast that Bud Light will not see any recovery in their prospects for the remainder of the year. If you'd like to go through any of these letters which came out of the U.S. Senate, I'll throw all the links to the PDF versions of them. They'll be down in the description box below this video for you to check out at your own leisure. And the last, you might not know this, but on the very same day that Joe Biden was sworn into office, by some magical coincidence, on that very same day, YouTube made the decision to demonetize our channel. Since January 10th of 2021, we have not been able to run ads before, during, or after our program, and the Super Chat feature has just been disabled. Now, every few months, I appeal that decision on the back end of this channel. And for the past 3 years, that appeal has been rejected time and time again. And the reason for the rejection is that some channel associated with our account has grossly violated YouTube's policy. They never tell us which channel, which piece of content, and which policy. And furthermore, every single one of our channels receives that very same message, meaning that every one of our channels gets denied monetization because the system claims one of the other channels violated a content policy. It's beautiful how it all works. And so, if you'd like to support the journalism that we do here at the Epoch Times, if you'd like to support our work, they've extended their awesome sale, just 25 cents a week for the whole year, which, if you do the math, works itself out to just be $1 a month. And so if you've been on the fence about subscribing, but you're definitely looking for a source of honest news, or perhaps take the sale as an opportunity to try the Epoch Times. That way, you can get access to all of the phenomenal content that we have over on the website. All the documentaries, the videos, the movies, the infographics, the deep analysis, the awesome articles, the great newsletters, and also I'll mention that I publish between 1 to 3 exclusive episodes of Facts Matter only on Epoch TV. And so if you'd like to watch,
even losing your freedom of speech and being censored on the internet, it's all being driven by ESG ideology. Who's in control?